and welcome to the Eternal ROI Podcast. My name is Chris Patton. I am the CEO of His Way at Work, and today I've got a very great episode to present to you and a guest that is not only an expert in his field, but also a friend and coworker. So I want to introduce you to Jody Armstrong. Jody is a His Way at Work master coach and is on staff for the organization. But Jody, before you came into the coaching, first of all, welcome.
Thank you. Good to be here, Chris.
Glad to have you. And before you came on with coaching, give me a sense, and the audience, a sense of what your career looked like before that. Just a brief overview.
So after graduating college, I went to work in the McDonald's supply system, and I worked there for 14 years, 4 of which were in distribution, 10 of which were representing a French fry manufacturer. I was responsible for our business with McDonald's in Canada and U.S.
Wow.
After I left there, then I went to the Burger King system where I worked for 13 years.
Wow.
And during that time, part of what I did was I was responsible for distribution in the United States. And I also worked for Burger King's supply chain manager, which was Restaurant Services Incorporated. And for a while, I worked for one of its subsidiaries called Supply Chain Services. And another part of my career was for Denny's, working for Denny's as U.S. Director of Distribution and U.S. Director of Distribution and Logistics. And that's what brought me to Spartanburg, actually.
Interesting.
And so then around 2013, 14, along in there, I've just felt the Holy Spirit tugging at me to do something else. I didn't really know what that was. But finally in 2015, he put me together with the His Way at Work group, and I've been coaching now for almost 8 years.
That's fantastic. So in 8 years, how many companies have you coached?
Somewhere between 25 and 30.
Wow. And is that 25, 30 individual companies, multiple locations? What does that look like?
So that's individual companies. The number of locations is somewhere closer to 45.
Interesting. Yeah. So, all right, if you've been doing this job, implementing the His Way at Work operating system into companies for almost 8 years, you said, and 40-something various locations of almost 30 companies, is it fair to say you're an expert in your field as it relates to implementing this system?
There's a lot to learn.
I get
but
that.
I'm definitely familiar with the His Way at Work implementation.
That's a fair
process.
way to put it. For everybody else, that's an expert. Okay. And the reason I say that is we have a number of coaches, 10 or so in the U.S., another 20 or 25 in Latin America, one in Spain at this point. And you are among the top 2 or 3 in experience. So you've got the most expertise of any of them. And it's important because the topic we're going to be talking about today is to cover the top 5, based on your experience, the top 5 challenges or the most common challenges that CEOs or business owners face when they're implementing this type of system, right? So they're trying to care or create a caring culture in their company. They're trying to use their company as a platform to do ministry and to see it as a tool that God's put in their possession to steward over time and create eternal impact. So as you've helped business owners through this process, you've seen them struggle at times, I assume.
I have.
It's not uncommon. If you're a business owner out there that's been trying some of this on your own, man, it is not uncommon to experience some struggles. And we're going to cover the top 5. There are certainly others. And even within the 5, we're not going to be able to cover everything in the time we have. But I think it's important, one, that we address them, because it's really good to know when you're a CEO or a business owner, it's so lonely at the top, right? You've heard that. It's good to know you're not the only one struggling in certain areas.
Absolutely. I mean, even in our own personal lives, we like to know, other people are struggling with this
Misery
too.
loves companies, right?
That's right.
So let's go through these top 5 challenges. You gave me a list before we sat down, but if you would just read through those top 5 real quick, and then we'll kind of pick them off one at a time.
So the first one that we get asked about a lot is this legal?
Yeah.
I mean, that's big for CEOs to know whether living out their faith at work is possible legally.
And getting to be more so a challenge, right? So what's number 2?
That's right. The second one is really it's a lack of recognition on the part of the CEO about what really creates a culture. And in this case, a caring culture.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot that goes into it, and sometimes that's minimized maybe.
It's a personal struggle.
Yeah.
So to admit that I don't have an understanding of what it takes to manage a culture, to create a culture, a caring culture, it's a personal admission. So
Yeah,
that's a big one.
Yeah. So what's number 3?
If a CEO fails to connect the core values, which is part of what we do during a project, is to help the leadership team to identify their core values within the company. If they fail to connect those to the employees and the everyday activities of employees, then the culture's just not going to take hold.
I gotcha. So number 4?
This one is interesting. The fourth one is, first of all, anyone that works for a CEO that cares about them should be grateful. And caring CEOs are really a gem. However, if a CEO can't turn loose of caring and delegate that to a caring team, which is part of what we recommend and we introduce to the company during one of our projects, it makes it difficult for the caring team.
Yeah, that delegation, that turning loose is hard, and for multiple reasons. So we'll touch on those. And then number 5 is probably my favorite.
Number 5 is that the CEO needs a support group.
They're alone.
It's lonely at the top, like you mentioned before, and the CEO needs someone that they can communicate with, an accountability group, a spiritual advisor, someone that can draw them forward and so that they can experience growth in the spiritual area of their life.
All right, so you've got the list of 5. Let's go back to number 1. Let's take a little bit of a dive into these. So you said fear of legal issues, concern, can I get sued for this? Is it legal? Am I going to get into trouble? Am I going to be in the news? Are there going to be headlines about our business and these things that I've forced on these people? So tell me from that CEO's perspective, what you've seen them struggle with. Is the root of that fear? Is it maybe ignorance? Not just having the correct knowledge of what is legal and what's not. And then secondly, not just what is the root, what are some solutions? What are some ways that these business owners can avoid that problem?
So I think that fear can be a result of ignorance, right? We fear what we don't understand or what we don't know. And there was a point in my life back before I got into coaching when I was considering it is I wondered if it was against the law to say the word Jesus in the workplace. Is it against the law to pray? And why did I wonder that? It's because nobody's telling me that it's not. It's not information that's readily available. So it's something that you really have to go search out. Yeah. And so the answer is no, it's not against the law to say Jesus. No, it's not against the law to pray in the workplace. And no, it's not against the law to live out your faith in the workplace. And as a matter of fact, a court case that went to the Supreme Court and was won by Hobby Lobby, in that case, and the legal experts can expand more on this, but from a layman's standpoint, it was proven out that if the leadership of Hobby Lobby had not been living out their faith actively, praying during the workday and demonstrating that they're living out the core values that they had identified, they would have lost that case.
It's the consistency with what they said they are. They were doing what they said they would do and living it out individually that gave the court the standing to say, you know what, that is who they are. That's what they do.
And that's what they do. Yes.
Yeah, that's great.
Yes.
So you say voluntary. Tell me what you mean by that.
If you're a CEO that wants to live out your faith in a workplace, that's great. But you can't force your employees to live out that same faith. You have to make all the activities that are surrounding anything to do with faith in the workplace voluntary. If I'm an employee in your company and I don't want to participate in praying, then I shouldn't be made to do that, and that'll keep you out of any kind of hot water there.
So when I was in the dealership business and we were doing Bible studies twice a week. So we do a lunch and a breakfast. We bring the food, invite the employees in, and have our chaplain or someone we invited from outside lead a very non-threatening, very simple Bible study. We didn't take attendance, and right or wrong, I made the choice not even to show up for those. Because the idea here is it needs to be voluntary. And I'm not advising as business owners, you don't show up. I didn't, because in that particular time, I felt like this could possibly be the case. You don't want them to feel it's required or that they're obligated.
Absolutely.
Right? Even if you don't write the requirement out there, but you make it clear, hey, I'm here, I'm watching, and I'm writing names down. It's the same thing as being required because they're going to assume that's going to impact my advancement, my income, whatever. So the whole key there is voluntary. They need to feel they are free to show or not show completely on their own, and there are no residual implications of whether they do or not.
Well, that's right, Chris. I mean, let's face it, faith is a personal choice.
Yeah, that's right. That's good. So voluntary, that covers that. So A, what did the A stand for?
So accommodating, meaning you may have some people in your company that are of a different faith. So we can't suppress that as a leader.
Interesting.
If you have another group that wants to pray at lunch, but they're not Christian, we need to be accommodating to that desire.
Yeah, that's a good point. And the words I've heard, reasonable accommodation, right? So Bob Pruitt from Alliance Defending Freedom shared this. He said an example might be that, where the lunch I mentioned, if another group wanted to use our conference room for a different day and it's during lunch and it doesn't impact the workday, it's reasonable that I would accommodate them for that. If they asked to take over the showroom floor of the dealership to have a prayer service of a different faith during a workday, and we've got clients, customers, we've got work going on, it wouldn't be reasonable for me to accommodate that. So I'm free to say no to something like that.
That's right. That's a really good example.
Yeah. So accommodating, voluntary and accommodating. And what's number 3?
So we've got non-discriminatory.
Okay.
Means we can't discriminate to any employees who decide not to participate. So, for instance, if I'm atheist and I don't want to pray with everybody else in the company or with a group of people who do want to pray in the company, I can't be penalized for that in any way whatsoever.
Yeah.
If I am, then I'm being discriminated against.
That's good. All right, and the final N is
non-threatening. And this goes hand in hand with non-discriminatory.
Sure.
I mean, I wouldn't want as an employee to be threatened because I don't believe the same thing that the people that own the company believe.
Right. If you want to be around here for a long time, you need to do these things, right? That doesn't say I'm going to fire you tomorrow, but it says if you really want to advance and kind of stay in the company, you need to kind of fall in line with the rest of us. That's just not.
It's not something that we can do. So we use that acronym VANN, V-A-N-N, to help us guide leadership in what they can and can't do.
That's good.
And it's a really good roadmap to keep us out of trouble.
Sure.
Really.
Sure. All right. So that's a challenge in the CEO's mind where, hey, is it legal? And hopefully that VANN acronym helps to resolve that challenge. Number 2 you had is that quite often the CEO or business owner, they don't fully recognize or understand what all is involved in creating a culture, especially a caring culture. There's a lot more to it than just, for example, Jody, you know this, you get the same requests I do. Quite often as his way at work, caring team is one of the things we're known for. It's a component of our operating system. And I get calls frequently or conversations with business owners, hey, I've got a lot of the stuff that I've been working on over years. I just want to add a caring team. I just want to do a caring team because I've heard that this stuff that you guys do is really powerful and I want to add that caring team. Well, the caring team is a good component, right? But it's only a component of an overall system. And if you don't have every component in the system, we were joking yesterday, if you've got the 3.5 liter EcoBoost engine, but you don't have the F-150 chassis and frame and transmission and electronics and seat, well, then you're not going anywhere, right?
That's right.
So what do you see most common for these CEOs? Their challenge in thinking the caring team is it, or are there other things that they see, and what do they most often overlook that's so critical?
Actually, the challenge is the recognition that of what it takes to build a culture.
Yeah.
And not just a culture, but a caring culture. And what do I mean by that? If all that it takes to build a culture is to identify some core values and a vision for caring and a purpose statement for the company, and you put it on the wall, and, let's add this caring team over here that's going to do some nice things for some people, that's not a caring culture. We're about transforming lives.
Yeah.
And you can't transform lives that way. We have to go deeper. And that involves the leadership team, led by the CEO, in conversations about their core values and their vision for caring and the company purpose. Why do we exist? That needs to be talked about all the time. What do I mean by all the time? Well, if the only time we're going to talk about these things is at the Christmas party or the summer picnic, it's not going to stick. We need to have our leadership team talking about core values really all the time in one-on-one conversations and with department employees. It should be a subject of discussion. Here's an opportunity, for instance. If you're a CEO and you have a meeting with your leadership team, it's a perfect opportunity to ask individual leaders, well, what does this core value of integrity mean to us? Let's dig into that and have a conversation about it. And that's a conversation that should be had between every leader and their employees.
Yeah,
that starts to then integrate what we're thinking with the work that we're doing.
Yeah. So as you mentioned that, you mentioned purpose statement, which is why do we exist? The mission being what we actually do, right? And then core values. And we'll talk about, I think, behaviors even below the core values here in a minute. But here's the picture I'm getting is a string or a chain of components in a system.
That's right.
And if you just plug in a single component without the chain going backwards upline in the system and afterwards, you've just got a team of people implementing some activities, but you don't have those same activities, that same team tied back into why do we exist? And what do we actually do? And with what values do we operate? And how does that translate into my daily job? All these things tie into how that team makes decisions, right? And a budget that's determined and the vision for caring that lays out the whole picture. All these are pieces that if you just have one or two of them, you will have activity, but you won't have transformation.
And you can have some good stuff happening.
Absolutely.
There could be some very good things happening.
In fact, that's the worst thing, is that you see some things happening and then you think, hey, we're on the right track.
Right.
But it may be 5 to 10% of what you could be seeing if you put the whole system in place.
And let's think about it from a dollars and cents standpoint. If you're spending X number of dollars on a caring culture and all you've got really is a small group of people, our caring team, doing some nice things here and there for people, you're not getting the best value out of the money that you're spending. And we all know that God calls us to be good stewards of what he gives us. And to be a good steward, we really need to connect that spending with support of our core values and our purpose statement and our vision for caring.
Right.
And it ties everything together. And
Exactly.
now we're starting to create this virtuous cycle of creating something that we call eternal value.
Exactly. And you throw in one of the components we didn't mention is the accountability, right? So the system that's built in place for that caring team to report back to leadership on the activities, on the results, and to see that continuous improvement going forward. And then the communication plan for celebrating those things we'll touch on in a minute. There's just a whole lot to it, I guess is the point.
That's right. In fact, you touched on something there, that the reporting back, the measurement piece.
Yeah.
Having spent 30 years in supply chain, we measured everything. And so the idea of measuring caring and caring activities, how many people we've helped, how did we help them, the dollars that we spent, really resonated with me. And it was one of the things that attracted me to his way at work, to become a coach.
Yeah. So to recap that, the CEOs, business owners will sometimes be challenged because they're thinking, hey, I think I know the 1, 2, or 3 components that go into this deal. And they're good components, and there are results from those components being in place. But when you put the whole system together, the synergy that's achieved, the exponential impact is what you're looking for instead of additional impact.
That's right. That's right. And that comes from connecting and creating a culture that, let me restate that. It comes from a CEO who recognizes what it takes to build a caring culture, and what it takes is to connect those core values to what we do in the workplace every day. And that's where you mentioned earlier that we get into behaviors.
Yeah.
We have to take that down one more level to the behaviors. So
let's do that. Let's do that. So number 3 is failure to connect the core values to the employee performance, right? So we're looking for a company to perform and a culture of performance, but also a culture of caring. But you can't get a company as a whole entity to align with core values. It's the individual employees that make up that company. So that's what we got to get. So for example, we've talked about it before, a CFO looks at the core value of integrity and they know what that means. It means one set of books.
That's right.
They're
Accurate.
timely, they're accurate, no fudging. But what does the forklift driver think of integrity, right? I've got to connect core value of integrity to that forklift driver's job before he or she is going to be able to say, all right, what I do matters. It matters to the purpose, the mission, and the core values of the company. Then we start to see results. So if the business owner doesn't make that connection and we haven't worked with them to help them make that connection, then there's obviously a disconnect, which affects performance adversely. So describe the behavior deal that you're talking about. How do we use behaviors to specifically make that connection?
So I've had that exact example take place in a coaching project with a company that I just love. And I asked that same question of the leadership team. One of their core values was integrity. And I asked them, what does it mean to the fork truck driver out on the dock out here? And the room was silent. And eventually the president held his hand up and said, well, for me, integrity for the fork truck driver is that if he hits my door and knocks it off the rack, that he'll go report it to a supervisor. And I said, oh, okay, reports damage. That's measurable. And also, if he spears a pallet of product, this was a food business, if he spears a pallet of product, loading it on the truck, it'll get off the fork truck and put good product on that pallet and load it onto the truck. Well, you can measure that through clean invoices. And so if I'm a fork truck driver, I begin to understand what integrity means. It means that if I have damage to the building, I report it, and other damage, I replace it. And that's something that is measurable.
Yeah, that's excellent. So when we make that connection, when we can get the CEO or business owner to understand and overcome that challenge, and therefore we have behaviors for each of these core values, we have an employee base from top to bottom that understands how their particular job is connected to those core values, we start to see performance that is much greater than otherwise. And then it even bleeds over into, okay, are we hiring for those core
Absolutely.
values? Are we doing performance reviews with those core values? You know, if I'm a mid-level manager or director and my employee review or my performance review by my supervisor includes a reference to core values, and I'm measured on that, and it affects my advancement and pay within the company, I begin to acknowledge and own the set of core values. I'm also going to take it down line. We start to see it permeate, and then there's dramatic change.
You
right?
recognize very quickly when you're being judged on how well you live out the core values through the behaviors that are in your job description, for instance. And when you do that on an annual basis, you connect really quickly that these core values are super important to the success of the company. They're super important to the CEO, and that the way we behave is going to shape the culture of this company.
Yeah. All right. So shift direction just a touch. To the business owner and CEO, we've kind of hit them pretty hard on a couple things, saying, you really ought to understand this. You really ought to know this. This next one, when you were framing it, you started off with, hey, if you're working for a business owner that truly cares about you, you should be thankful, right? They
That's
are
right.
a gym. So we'll start out by saying you are a gym if you're hearing this and you're making some efforts in this direction or feeling led in this direction. But one of the hesitations you mentioned or challenges is the hesitation to turn loose, to let go, to delegate the caring for employees to other employees, right? Letting
right.
go as the owner of the company and not feeling that you're the one that has to do it or that you want to be involved, but allowing others to do that. And tell me some about the challenge in the CEO's mind, and then we can talk about how to overcome that.
So let's face it, when we help people, it feels good. When we finally, as an individual, recognize that helping people, it helps us feel good. It is good. There's all kinds of good things that come out of that. And so a CEO that cares for his employees and is doing good things for them is a very good thing. However, the CEO may be missing people. And this is one of the things I like about His Way at Work implementation is that it helps the CEO touch everybody in the company. Because let's face it, the people who may need help in his company are people who are probably raising their hand and saying, I'm in a ditch right now and I need some help. Can you help me? And the people who are going to do that are people who aren't ashamed. They're not too proud. They're willing to take that risk with the leader and say, I need some help.
And their need is not job threatening.
That's right. That's right. And so, but there are other people who may be too proud to ask for help, or they're too shy to ask for help.
Or they started last week.
That's right.
And they don't know the lay of the land yet.
That's right. And so that's where the caring team comes into a real important piece, because we recommend that peer level people are on the caring team, and the caring team then is a little less it doesn't seem as intimidating to go to a caring team member and ask for help.
Yeah, so you say peer level, I'm thinking entry level, right? As low in the company as you can go.
Frontline employees.
Yep.
Yes. So, which is a great way to go about this thing. So now let's imagine that we have this set up. We have the caring team. They've been delegated the authority to make decisions on caring for their employees and employees' families, and they've been given a budget. They're all set up. We're ready to go. They understand the core values, and they've been given the authority to make these decisions. And the CEO then sits in on the meetings and makes the decisions. I understand how hard it would be for a CEO not to do that, but that is a challenge. It's one of these 5 that we're talking about here, for the CEO to turn loose of that and let his caring team do the job.
So I'm hearing two main reasons for that. One is there are certain personality types. I certainly do not ignore the fact that I might have this in my blood, but certain personality types that need to be in control, leading, not necessarily even to the extent of dominating the room and pushing people down, but just simply they're wired to lead in a group. If that CEO is in a caring team meeting, they're not going to be able to sit silently as we recommend. They're going to engage, and by engaging, just out of their personality traits, they're going to end up taking over, right? But then there's a second type that also has the same challenge, just for different reasons. That's the type you mentioned. It feels good to care. So maybe there's another business owner that says, you know what, I don't need to dominate. I just want to be in the middle of it. I just want to feel what it feels like to be in the middle of caring. The problem still remains those entry-level employees are not going to behave the same way. They're not going to make the same decisions if you're in the room working with them on this team process.
That's right. And that's the challenge for the CEO.
Yeah.
And so how do we address that?
Yeah,
so
good question.
What we do is we work with the caring facilitator and the CEO and the leadership team to devise a communication plan that the caring team will communicate back to the leadership what's going on with caring, and not just numbers and not just ideas, but also here are some stories. Here we don't use names. Here are who we help, but here are some people that we help. And so that way, the leadership team still is involved in caring and recognizes what the company is doing to care for their employees without making the decisions.
Yes. And then I would say add to that, part of what we do in our process is to help them create a communication plan, right? So capturing those, not just in reporting, but in anecdotal stories around what's going on, even video capture of those stories, and passing that out through the company, letting the CEO see firsthand these stories and the inspiration of that, I think is critical.
That's right. That's right. And by turning loose, then we have a caring system that can answer anyone's needs in the company, not just those who are brave enough to speak up.
Yeah. That's very good. So we talked about the last one a little bit. This is my favorite. It is that the CEO is lonely at the top, right? They don't have anyone in the company they can confide completely in, because there are always going to be things that they've got to be thinking about and managing that they just simply can't share with the whole team. So the challenge is that fact, is managing life and doing things within the business when you really don't have anybody to talk to about it. And so our recommendation there is a peer advisory group, right? Like a C12.
Absolutely. I mean, let's face it. Jesus had 12 advisors. I mean, the King of the universe had people that he referred to, that he talked to.
And he was constantly praying to the Father.
He was constantly praying, and he was constantly teaching them the core values, so to speak. But he depended on them as well. He was fully divine, but also fully human. And so we're built to be in communion with each other. And good. Even when you're at the top of your company, you still need either someone or a group to help guide you and to advise you and to walk with you on your spiritual journey, because as you begin to live out your faith in the company, it is a spiritual journey. And in some cases, spiritual warfare.
Yeah, you're going to be under attack.
You need to have a community around you to help you face whatever comes at you.
So whether it's spiritual formation, discipleship, the spiritual growth in a group like that, it's accountability in that group. Being able
accountability is key.
I'm committing to do this or to stop doing this, and you've got a group of people that are willing to hold you accountable to that. It's knowing yourself, right? Go back to the number 4, which is that hesitation to let go. A group like this will look at you and say, Jody, you're a control freak, man. Let go and step out of the group, right? Or they'll say, hey, you're a junkie for caring, and I know you want that, but you're the lid for your organization now. Step out and let the multiplication begin and find another outlet for your need.
That's right.
Right? That group will do that for you, especially if you empower them.
That's right.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Well, Jody, this has been deep and rich. Thank you for sharing.
You're welcome. This is really the first time I've been able to talk about what I do on a daily, weekly basis for the last 7 years. And so it's been a really great opportunity. Thanks, Chris.
Well, I appreciate your expertise, your experience, the work you do with the organization. And, man, it's just been great. So we will do another episode coming up where we'll talk through some similar challenges, but from a different perspective. So I look forward to that.
Me too.
Great.
Thanks, Chris.